Hello, and thanks for joining today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about transitioning your consolidation from the legacy BCS solution over to Business Planning and Consolidation, or BPC. So today, what I wanted to walk you through were some slides specific to similarities, differences between the BCS and BPC solutions. I also have kind of a customer use case where we actually migrated or transitioned this company to BPC from BCS. And then, depending on the time, I wanted to log in and actually show some of those comparisons within the business planning and consolidation tool. The similarities, the differences, and kind of point some of them out within BPC. So hopefully that will round out the hour, and then certainly if there's any questions or anything that I can help with. My name is Beth McBreen. I am a Solutions Director at Simplify Solutions. I've been working with the BPC product for over 15 years and consulting in design and architecture, and certainly in the last 10 years. So in addition to that, Simplify Solutions, we're really focused within, just real quick, within the EPM space as well as the analytics space. So while our primary focus in the last few years has always been BPC, we also are playing a pretty prominent part in the analytics cloud as well. So we have a well-rounded group with lots of experience and a lot of history within EPM solutions. So real quick, just wanted to kind of give a high-level overview of business planning and consolidation, or BPC, just so that we kind of level set and understand, what does BPC do? What does it solve? Well, it solves our mission-critical business processes. Today, as we talk about BCS, or that legacy business consolidation system that SAP has, we really focus on that top right quadrant, I suppose, right, is the consolidation piece. And so again, as we talk about today, converting over, that's just one piece of a business process that BPC solves and helps with. In addition to that, you have your planning, your forecasting, your financial management reporting, all of that within one environment, within one solution. And so while this may be just a small piece that you would be converting over, know that you're able to perform your planning and your forecasting and have everything within one solution at your fingertips to be able to do that reporting, comparison, and analytics. Okay. The other really nice thing with BPC that you'll see, hopefully as we get into the demonstration later, would be around the user experience and kind of the user interface. While it does have a web interface where it has things like your monitors, your consolidation monitors, your control monitors that give visibility to areas within your process, and business process flows that kind of take you through step by step, a consolidation close, for example. All of that kind of resides within the web interface, but where the users really thrive in is within the Excel interface. And so there's a lot, and we'll talk about that and some of the similarities and differences, and what some of the, with this customer, what some of the wins were, what they really liked, in terms of something around mapping, but really just kind of overall the capabilities and the functionality that exists and that resides within the Excel add-in. So versus the BCS workbench or like Consolidation Monitor. So we'll talk about those just a minute here, but just again, kind of the core piece of BPC would be, having a unified solution and really the end user experience, really working with the Microsoft Office suite, primarily Excel. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the differences, some of the similarities and differences. And, really what I'm basing this off of is based off of the implementation that we did with this customer, and kind of looking at, and not just my insight, as a consultant, but also their insight as they were day-to-day users with BCS, and looking at, okay, what's different between the two, and what do we have to be prepared for. And we kind of broke it out. I broke it out into a couple different buckets. And the first one is from a user experience, and so I've got a couple bullets here. When, again, talking about journals, BCS has the Consolidation Monitor. BPC journaling is done within the web interface. So there's a web interface. You go to journals, you enter in your journal entry, and the reporting, any reporting off of the journals can be produced via the web as well. So that's a little bit different. From an ownership structure perspective, again, BCS Consolidation Monitor. In BPC, you have a couple different options based on the level of complexity of your ownership structure. So you can actually maintain them in a separate model, which you can modify within the web interface and update ownership percentages as applicable. Some companies go the route of using an input template, which is nothing more than going into Excel and using Excel as the vehicle to enter into different cells and save that information back to the database so that it may perform the appropriate consolidation calculations. So a lot of companies will choose the input template route, again, just familiarity with Excel, comfort, and so that's an option that many companies choose. The eliminations, again, this is generated through the Excel add-in. So able to, whereas BCS is via the Consolidations Monitor, there is the capability. BPC does have a Consolidations Monitor, and you can click the button and it can run. The flexibility, though, of having it within the Excel add-in to, basically select what we call a data manager package or a batch process that will run. You have good visibility in terms of kind of audit trails and everything in terms of when we can capture when the eliminations have been run, who ran them, so on and so forth. The totals records, that the data logs that would more likely exist within the Consolidation Monitor, BCS, really ends up being just an ad hoc report in BPC using the EPM add-in. So there's no real systematic or functionality within BPC that provides kind of these total records. It's something that would either reside more in the BW layer or, again, just using an ad hoc report to do the comparison. And from the reporting, this is what, again, assuming that I have time, I want to show a little bit of the reporting on the EPM side versus with BPC versus using, BCS using the BEX functionality to perform your reporting. So the BPC has the EPM add-in, and we'll talk through what those capabilities are. But those are some of the again, similarities, more so some of the differences, I suppose, from a user experience perspective. When we look at configuration, the data modeling really what is considered workbench in BCS is replaced by what we call in BPC the administration console or the admin console. It is also located within that web interface, and should you have access, should you be an administrator of the system, you will have access to to master data changes, to security updates, to journal, making changes to the journal entry template. So a number of different things and processes occur within the admin console. Master data is one of them. It's maintained in the admin console. BPC within BW, it creates its own info object. So the admin console is treated as you can create a new dimension or master data, and it will go ahead and, based on your front end, providing all the information you need, you process it, it creates that info object on the back end within the BW layer. Consolidation functions, again, this is, eliminations. This could be NCI, it could be a number of different kind of calculations required for consolidating of your financials. Primarily all of that is maintained in the admin console. We have different business rules, we have business rules tables, we have script logic, all of those work together, but all of that is primarily just maintained within the admin console. Usually an administrator needs to have responsibility for that. Whereas that may have been done in the workbench previously. There are delivered programs. There are standard canned programs for eliminations, for things like currency translations. And so it utilizes that plus the combination of our master data or our dimensions. It uses properties or attributes, and for us to be able to flag or group certain items. And so really the combination of those two gets us to producing those consolidation functions or calculations within the system. Data loads, this is what I was talking about. The transformations, conversions are all maintained within the Excel add-in versus BCS's workbench. There likely will be more transformations and conversions that will be applied when you're loading data from into BPC. However, the security piece is essentially, it leverages BPC, BCS follows the BW security. BPC also requires BW authentication. However, the read-write access and the task access, which is what I can do, can I send data, can I publish a book, those type of things are actually created within the BPC admin console, and then BPC creates the BW roles in the back end. They will automatically be created based on that front end user experience to be able to make those changes. So that's slightly different, where they need to be authenticated and set up within BW, but then once they're there, it's BPC, it's the layer of BPC that actually provides that access. So we talked about user experience, we talked about configuration, and then just kind of high level around data. One of the things that is, there's a couple that are pretty noticeable that's different from a data perspective, and one is the posting levels in BCS. In BPC, we have what we call an audit trail dimension, and that essentially is the same thing as the different posting levels. It gives us the visibility to see source data, to see adjustments, to see eliminations, and it just kind of, it parses out all the different levels of data so that we can see each individual piece as well as all together. What the audit dimension does is it's not rigid. Posting levels have their numbers and assigned to what each one should be doing for you. Audit dimension is customizable. So you could create a source GL level, then you could have manual adjustments, and you could call it, manual adjustment or manual ADJ as your ID. So you can create anything that you want. You can have your elim, you can have your allocation. So there's a number. You can have your restatement. So there's a number of different audit trail and capabilities, and so it's very flexible to be able to create the ones that again are meaningful to your company and to your financials. In BCS, it allowed for, you could create these custom rules. You could have, okay, these are the affiliated accounts, and they require a trading partner, for example. BPC doesn't have necessarily that. It's not where it's going to, you may have an attribute that you have to identify as an affiliated account, but there's no rule that says it needs to be populated or it doesn't. What is not available also in BPC is there's no null or blank records or fields within BPC. So something has to go to every dimension. So if there is no intercompany, it might be non-intercompany, it might be none, intercompany none. If there's, typically there's always a company code, there's always an account. we use something called the flow dimension. If there's nothing assigned, it might be go to flow none. If there's not, some companies have cost centers or profit centers included in their financial model. It would go to cost center none or profit center none. So it has to go somewhere. It has to be defined in all instances. And then eliminations is probably the other big change between the two systems, because rather than BCS using a posting level and it's recorded at the company code, in BPC it creates that entry and actually posts it into a separate elimination company. So when I run a consolidating report, I'm able to see, here are all of my entities and my elimination company as well, in my different columns. It's very easy to be able to create those. So there's no, again, need for the one-sided entries. It proved to be very helpful for having multiple hierarchies, as well as some of the segment reporting that was done. And then we talked about, as it relates to intercompany eliminations or other, validations become more of a customized report in BPC. BCS would have a data log. So those are, just a couple things from a user experience, from kind of the configuration as well as the data that we uncovered as part of this. Now to kind of walk through, what I wanted to do next was to walk through a sample customer use case where we actually did the conversion and talk about, what the actual critical pain points were. And of course, what some of the major wins were, but I always feel that more often than not, companies will ask me what went wrong versus what went right, because they want to make sure that that doesn't happen to them. And so, some of these could be very specific to the company, or it could be resonate with another customer that is looking to do that conversion. They say, yes, you know what, we're probably going to run into that same experience. So the company that I worked with was in the telecommunications industry. They provide, wireless, cable and wireline broadband, different hosted managed services, so numerous services, and over 400 GL companies. They had different degrees of ownership, so they had different calculations and ownership structures that they needed to maintain. It made it a little bit easier. The offset to that was that they were domestic only. So we didn't have the challenges that we may have occurred with currency translations, CTA, things of that nature. They had numerous business goals going into this project. And number one was obviously to just retire that legacy BCS solution. So they implemented BCS back in 2004. They, at the same time, had this external reporting data warehouse that they implemented. They are a full SAP shop, so it just at that time had made sense to, they were already leveraging BW, it made sense for them to move to the BCS solution for their consolidations. What happened then more recently was looking at BPC, because BPC was already in place there for strategic planning. So a year before we did this conversion from BCS to BPC, they implemented BPC first for strategic planning. So we did an implementation first there, and then once that went live, they looked at that business goal of having a common database, having one single source of the truth. Not having to pass data back and forth to just different systems or export it to Excel and give you this information and then let that person manually massage the data and get it into, a comparative report. They wanted one common database. And so they kind of analyzed everything and said, BPC is going to be the chosen platform to go forward for our strategic planning, our detailed planning, our consolidation. Right? So they made that business decision and decided, okay, because of this, we're going to move forward with BPC and consolidation. Some of the other, those I would think are a little bit more strategic decisions, making sure we have a common database, and wanting to ultimately retire the legacy BCS. They knew it wasn't going to continue to be supported either, that they weren't making investments into that solution. Here were some of the other pieces that I would say more from the day-to-day operations of consolidating, what they wanted to get out of the system. They wanted to eliminate like 25% of the spreadsheets that they use. They had a number of what they would consider their consolidation work papers, and that it was very manual. It was very difficult for them to compile every month. The other piece is their cash flow was completely manual as well, so having to prepare that, and then have supporting documentation for their footnotes. So that was a big one, to try and reduce the dependency on all the spreadsheets that they were creating. They were basically pulling that information out of BCS and doing a number of things within Excel. Those consolidation work papers to generate and pull data information would take 15 to 20 minutes to run. So, and it would, kind of lock up what they were doing. So it was, set it, run it, and go have lunch, or, and that's not very productive in that, if you have to do this over and over again, especially if you're running these work papers and then there's changes and, the book's open again and you got to go through the process again. So that was something they wanted to reduce time in general, to just generate reports and be able to get the financial statements out faster. They are a company that's very big with SOX compliance. So to kind of help automate the journal entry approval process as best they could. In BPC, they have the segregation of duties where you can have your preparer, you can have your person that reviews and posts. They implemented a solution also that took and posted this information with approval status out to SharePoint. That's kind of that's where the end approval resulted in and resided, I guess, was out on their SharePoint environment. They did actually use and considered using, BPC does have a repository on their web admin as well, but because of a license situation and other users that would want to see that information is why they decided SharePoint would be the best spot for it to reside. The accelerated entry process for prior period adjustments, they do restatements frequently, and was always a little bit painful for them. They want to make sure that they can do it very quick. They get these prior period adjustments, they can go in, they can make the adjustment. And then just, of course, just reducing the IT and support costs. There's that redundant BCS functionality. I think that was being done in BCS and also being done, manually on spreadsheets. So in addition to that, they had kind of created that data warehouse at the same time as BCS, and some of that historical data and everything resided there. They wanted to really remove that entirely and just have everything reside within BW. Okay, so those were some of the business goals, when they put their business case together to go forward with the consolidation phase of the project. These were things that they identified right away that would be beneficial to them. And our project scope was just focused on consolidations and really the reporting around that. So to be able to manage those financial closings, what is it going to take to do that? What is it going to take to be able to have the reporting generated from there? The journal entries, the eliminations, and really any other business processes is what we focused on from a project standpoint. So let's talk about within this project, within this conversion, what were the pain points? What did they experience that required additional effort and time? Again, a couple of these are certainly specific. They decided right off the bat to expand their scope. They wanted a new chart of accounts. Their existing consolidated chart was outdated. it was painful, time consuming. It was expanded scope right off the bat when we started design. They said, you know what, but this is the right time to do it. And so it kind of took a lot of courage, I feel. Some companies want to shy away from that and say, no, let's focus at the task at hand, which is to get this into BPC. But they wanted to make this change. Really, it wasn't overall. It may have slid the timeline slightly, but it really was on their end to pick up additional validation effort, because it's, we've got new mapping and a new chart of accounts, and we have to make sure that everything validates to the old financials as well. So again, if they talk about it now, they still will say that the benefits of this largely outweighed what the extra work was. And so they would do it again. They make sure to bring up, when we go into these additional phases, what are, typical, areas like this, like changing chart of accounts, or some things that are not necessarily part of the original scope, but not to, push it to the side, to really talk about it and what makes sense for the project. ECC data load. So this was another more of a heavy burden on them from a validation standpoint. So they were discussing utilizing the existing staging cube. So there's a staging cube that goes from ECC to staging to BCS. It was in their original environment. They discussed, should we just leverage that staging cube and load that to BPC? The decision, they made a new ECC reporting cube. It needed to load ECC multiple times. There were some other restrictions with what they were doing on the old staging cube. So again, that added some additional work. Wasn't something that was originally planned out, but because of the mapping changes, it becomes just data all the time. That's where projects will get you anyway. But it's just the reconciliation, the validation of all the data that took additional time, additional resources that they had to put on the project for that. The journal entry conversion was also, and the eliminations probably the most were challenging because in BCS document types were used to kind of segregate the manual entries that they did and the elimination entries, which were system generated. The manual entries weren't as big of a challenge because we were able to take those and just put them in their own audit trail ID within BPC. The eliminations were a little bit trickier because they were just, a certain posting level, but we also had to get them into the right elim company buckets. Again, in BPC, you create elimination companies versus, and you also kind of have it in an elimination audit trail, which would be more like a posting level. But now we're kind of spreading that across and putting that in two places. So it wasn't as easy. It was, a little bit more challenging to make sure that we had that data mapped properly when we loaded the historical information. They loaded 10 years of historical information. So really, on a normal project, 5 years would be the max. They wanted to load and took on the challenge of validating 10 years of historical data. So that was, again, that was a big increase in some of their overall validation efforts. The Carryforward was a change for them. So for when we specifically talk about balance sheet accounts, BCS is a periodic model. They decided that, in BPC, you have the option to also have a periodic model, or you can also have a year-to-date model. So they decided to stay consistent and implement a periodic model in BPC. Because of that, it required a carry forward of the balance sheet account. They would actually just load the balance sheet activity. BCS was more of an annual carry forward process, and BPC would actually do this monthly. So while it's a well-oiled machine now, it was more with the data conversions and getting everything lined up they would have to run these carry forwards to get, ending balance to get to beginning balance. And so it was a challenge for them, and looking back, would we look at doing something different here? Maybe, that might have been an area where, we could have improved upon, because that was, having to go through and kind of run the carry forward for all that history. Certainly took some time to make sure that everything was working. And then, loading historical cash flow statements, that was, we knew that the future would be through BPC, but we kind of had to take what they did in Excel and convert that into the BPC dimensions. So again, that was a little bit more of a painful exercise. So a lot of the, the common theme here really is getting all the history, right? And that's the biggest pain point of the conversion is probably the historical data and how that fits within your BPC dimensionality. The rounding, this was, they had they're very big, obviously, on the rounding of their financial statements and the ones that will be published. So they, in BPC, you have a couple different options. We've built actual packages that will take the rounding and do some automated calculations and place them into, basically buckets within. You identify what accounts you want them to adjust, and it makes that adjustment for you. They decided to go the manual route. They make changes all the time and want flexibility. So they have an input template in Excel that pulls it in, allows them to make changes. They can send those changes back, and then all your financial statements will foot. But that was still, a challenge for them to figure out how to get the rounding to work appropriately. So what were the major wins with the conversion? And so for this company, I think the first two, hands down, were, had them smiling going into their financial closes every month, because the cash flow statement took them a long time. They were only able to do it, they only did it at the segment before, I think because of the time commitment to it. In BPC, it's 90% automated. Of course, you're going to have some non-cash or other adjustments or reclasses that you want to do within the cash flow statement. So it gets them 90, probably 95% there. They might have to make an adjustment, but everything is just generated. They're able to look at the cash flow statement and then, react to that and make any adjustments that they need. So they don't have to maintain it in spreadsheets. Having to do year-to-date cash flows and all that, sometimes in Excel can start to be painful. So all of it ended up being real slick and nice for them to use. The speed on the reports is probably the biggest win, because now to refresh and get their financial statements, as well as all of their work papers that they reproduced using BPC reports, all would take seconds versus minutes. So they were very happy with the capability to get the data out and in a fast manner. They would before, ask the budgeting or their strategic planning group, they would ask for all this information and they would get that data in Excel. And again, they would have to they would send spreadsheets back and forth. Now everything, there's a push button where they can pull budget data in from the budgeting model, or vice versa. When budget's done, they push it over to the consolidation model, and now they have that there at their fingertips. So it was a very nice streamlined approach for them to be able to do that, see reporting. The forecast will be done, the forecast gets pushed, and they're able to see their reports with their actual budget forecast information. So all of that was certainly streamlined that process for them, where they didn't, have to go and do this manual effort anymore. The next two are actually pretty much the same. It's really the ability on revisions, the restatements, their the historical data can be changed in seconds. So being able to do the restatements, they actually have a program that we created in Script Logic that allows them to do these restatements very quickly. They can actually, they can track the revisions, the restatements. So they were really pleased with how easy it was for them to go back and do those type of efforts with their consolidation where it was difficult in the old system. So, and obviously going back to what one of their main business goals was, is there's one source of the truth. They're not, producing different spreadsheets now. Everything is being pulled directly, into or via the BPC database. So those were kind of really the key things that stuck out for them, that they were, really excited, are still excited and happy using the system. Okay. So let me switch gears here, and I'm going to pull up I'm going to pull up a couple different live views of BPC. One that will be related to the web interface, to show a couple of that. One that will be related to Excel. Talk about the web interface first. So, okay. So this is the web interface for BPC 11. I am actually just in the process of building up our internal environment. So I have some things that are populated, others that are not, but I still wanted to show you the web interface for the most recent version. Typically, there's a home page where you can post some graphs. If you have any business process flows or things that are activities that are your responsibility to do, there will be some notifications that will pop up. This is the library. So if I draw your eyes to the top left, we have in the menu bar, right? So I can click that, and I can go to my home page. Again, this is customizable, where you could put some web reports, you could put a graph or two, you can pin those to your home page. You have your favorites, right? So this may be, again, this is more web-based reporting. So maybe I step back just one second. You have the capability to do some of the web reporting and some of the graph. There's some graph options as well. Not always are the users of BPC Excel savvy, if you will. So there's sometimes where the users may just want to jump into the web interface and view a report, view their numbers, enter in a forecast. There are a number of different reasons, but BPC gives the flexibility to do it within either the web or Excel. So here we have a library. You can see I have a number of different reports. These are all, web-based reports. I go back to my menu bar here. Activities, this is something that is, I guess would be something new. If I click on my activities, you may hear the term activities, you may hear the term business process flow. What BPC does is it gives you a step-by-step kind of guided approach to completing process. There we go. And so I, quickly kind of put together and outlined a consolidation process. I may have a consolidation process. I may have a forecast, a monthly forecast process. There could be a number of different processes that I have responsibility to perform or to complete. What it does, again, gives kind of a step-by-step guided approach. So I can click on consolidation process, and then it gives me a number of different options. Prep steps, manual journal entries, intercompany, the consolidation itself, different reports. I could click on one of them, and here's where I actually have the tasks that I might be doing. Again, this is just an example. But what this does is this links you essentially back to either a web template or an Excel template. So these just provide the links that help you navigate through where you're going to go. You do not have to use this. I get asked the question, well, do you have to use this to get to these templates? Absolutely not. You can just go into your Excel add-in and pull it up that way. However, I always think that this is also a good training exercise, something good to keep up when you have new users, to be able to have something to help them get comfortable with what your consolidation process is. So you can see here, there's some breakdown reports by different groups, financial statements, things of that nature. So that's what we call our activities, or our BPF, or business process flow. All right, so that's kind of within my web interface as well. And then you have the different monitors, and I don't have all of this set up quite yet, but just to kind of give you an idea, within the consolidation, this is somewhat similar. So you have the consolidation monitor, the controls monitor. If your company requires equity pickup, there's an equity pickup monitor. This is where you can manage your ownership structures and store your percentages, and then also to enter in any manual journal entries. All of this falls under the consolidation grouping, okay? And so the consolidation monitor is just a visual of where we're at. So any of this running, I can, from this monitor, assume I may have all of my entities here, and then I can see I haven't executed this, but I can run my currency translation, or I can just go ahead and, when I click translate currency, it gives me different, what do you want to translate it on, and I make my selections, and I can run that here. So you can run the consolidation from the monitor, but again, you don't have to. The consolidation can also be run via Excel, that Excel add-in, which is usually what more users tend to lean towards. This is not, again, it'll identify and give you a status as to, has the consolidation been done for every legal entity? Has equity pickup been run for these entities? So, so again, the consolidation monitor here, in my opinion, gives you more visual kind of stoplight approach, green, red, and tells you whether things are right or wrong. The controls monitor does a similar thing. You can embed controls into BPC. So you want to make sure your balance sheet's in balance. You want to make sure fixed asset roll forwards are in balance. That helps, again, populate your cash flow. So we need to make sure that people update if we have cash flow additions, disposals. If those aren't in balance, the controls monitor, again, is just another visual monitor that will pick up and allow you to see whether or not company has passed all their validations. So that's something that's customizable that you would just set up. You can have it be a warning. You can have it completely block and not finish. As I mentioned before, the journal capability here too, I don't think I have that set up yet. But these are all kind of the main consolidation functionality from the web interface. Okay, you can see if I got a new journal here. There we go. So this would be a sample of a journal entry template where you may have your manual, monthly manual entries that need to be made. So in any event, you have account. I have here what the account is, the flow. Maybe I should have company code here too, or entity as well. But then it allows you the debit credit nature where you can go ahead and enter in your information. And then I have the ability to save it. Because I'm an admin, I can see everything. I can post it. Certainly if I didn't have that level, I would only be able to save it. Then the next person would come in, they'd be able to click the post button. You can generate the reports off of it for documentation purposes, and so on and so forth. So that's really where the journals come into play. The administration, again, this is if I was an admin, I can go ahead and see my administration. This is where I handle all of my dimensions and my data models, those business process flows. So again, just kind of going through the main menu here from a web interface perspective, those are the type of things that you're going to see and use on the web interface, okay? So I just want to change gears here and move over to the Excel for those of you that are new with BPC, considering moving over or switching. The Excel interface is, like I mentioned before, where everyone lives and breathes in. Within Excel, you'll see I've got 2 additional tabs at the top. I have an EPM, I have a Data Manager tab. I can log off and log on. So I could have, a report open here that I've saved to my desktop. I can come in here, I can log on. I can just click the refresh button and it'll refresh with whatever the most current data is in the database. So if I had October here, it would go ahead and populate with October information. There is the capabilities is, when we talk specifically for consolidations, I mentioned you could run that from the Consolidation Monitor. Truthfully, I've done numerous consolidation implementations. Usually the users get comfortable with this Data Manager tab, which they get the ability to, on demand, kind of push this run. You can push run package. You can have the ability to schedule these if you wanted to. But again, these are all some of the different packages that I could run to import my data. I can have a package that would be run consolidation, or specifically run my eliminations, run my currency translation. I think I only have one up here that's just my currency translation. So all of those are, again, I can kick them off when I want to just, run the package. And that's really everything that's within my Data Manager. I mentioned before that the other difference is that the conversions and the transformations all reside also in Data Manager and also within Excel, right? So I can come in here, if there's a mapping change or something, I can come into conversion files and I can manage those right here within Excel. So, from talking with other users, this is definitely a more flexible approach for them. Easy for them to understand and make adjustments too. So I won't go ahead and click on any of those at this point, or maybe I will. Let me see if I open up this for you. Oh, no. So just an example, you can see where you literally have an external and an internal column. So pretty easy. You can identify different groupings. There's wildcards and everything that you can apply as well. But that's really the extent of mapping, converting your data into BPC. So if we need to do that also from converting the BCS into BPC, assuming it's the chart of accounts or that is going to be different, we will leverage things like this to get your data in, your historical data in as well. So the EPM tab itself is really made up of, again, the Data Manager tab is really just around that, maintaining your mappings, running your consolidation packages, which could be your LIM, could be your cash flow, could be your currency translation. All of that kind of falls within Data Manager. Then you get to the EPM tab, which you've got reports. Obviously, reporting's the big one, the output of all this information, all of your consolidated financials. There's the data analysis that I'll show you a little bit on the ad hoc side that gives us the capabilities of the drill down. Data input. So as I mentioned before, journal entries are a great way to, when you want to make sure that you've got that debit-credit relationship, to make sure that you have the segregation of duties where if somebody should be, creating and preparing the journal entry and somebody else should be posting that. That really provides the level. There's also the capability to just use Excel and to make changes to numbers. I think I have a forecast template over here where this is a forecast template, what I'm showing you, but really this could be a manual adjustment template. This could be a restatement template. So there's a couple different, from a consolidation standpoint, where you can also leverage Excel to make updates to your data. Now, we don't make those updates directly to the source data. As I mentioned before, we've got that audit dimension. If I open up the audit dimension here for a second, this is where you can see, for forecast, I might use an input. Now, I might also have opening balance that comes from my GL. I may have adjustments. I may have allocations. Certainly with consolidations, I would have a LIMS and maybe even actually store my different consolidating entries in different buckets of the audit trail dimension as well. So, exactly this data input section here on the EPM is really all around that, being able to make changes within BPC and saving that data back. It's just as simple as, you can see I changed this number in this template, it flagged it. I can say I'm going to save one data record. Do you want to continue? Right, and so it saves that back. So this can happen again from a forecast, and when we're talking about BCS and consolidations, we can do that for any. The other big one with consolidations would be roll forwards. So again, being able to have your debt roll forwards or your fixed asset roll forwards, intangibles. I'm trying to think of some of the ones that we most commonly do, but those are ways that you can actually just key in information directly into the Excel environment and save that back. We have typically templates that help you do that. Collaboration can be a big one within the consolidation arena. It allows you to publish your financial set. So if you want a book of income statement, balance sheet, cash flow by legal entity, you can do that, and you can, with a push of the button, and it'll produce it either in one big Excel workbook, should you want that. It'll produce it into PDF format, so a couple different options there. And then the distribution actually takes it one step further, and instead of just publishing it and saving it to a folder on the server, it'll actually distribute it out via users' emails. So that's kind of what the collaboration does. I know several companies that take advantage of this functionality as they go through every monthly close and have their financial books that they produce. The concept of, within BPC, you have the ability to drill through. So BPC is more at that consolidated level, right? We don't have transactions in BPC. We have account level information, company code information, and which keeps the BPC models optimized so we have good performance. But there is the capability to drill through. I can drill through back to BW where those transactions may be stored. I have the ability to drill back to ECC T codes that'll pop up and fill my parameters in based on what I'm looking at, a particular company code or other. So that's what the drill through capability is, and so it gives you that extra step and that extra connectivity, I guess. BPC, mentioned either drilling back to BW information or drilling and passing the parameters to a T code we've done. Those are just a couple of the examples that we typically do. And then you have your context. So I've got all my different dimensions listed up at the top, different ways that I can slice and dice the data. It leverages, 100% Excel. So I know I'm going to lose some of the, kind of hard to see. I've got, a chart down here. But the nice thing about this as well is I can make changes to my data set and it'll, be reflective in my chart. To make changes and make adjustments to an existing report is very easy. I could come in, maybe I want to change this report. No longer, I don't want to see, this looks kind of messy with all these months, right? So I'm going to change this to a full year. I can come in and edit my report and just say, you know what, I'm going to have time, I'm going to use my category instead. And I'm going to pull category into my columns just to give you kind of an idea here of how easy it is to make adjustments. Maybe I want to look at actual budget and forecast. And I just want those members only. So I'm going to say member only, move those over here and say okay. And say okay. Okay, so just as easy as that, making a quick change. Now I've got a report that I've adjusted. I could come in here and add some percentages if I want, variances, variance to budget, variance to forecast. I can start applying some of those. But yeah, my chart changes. So again, being able to use existing reports, and there are some templates that are out there for you. You can make those changes. What I really like about the ad hoc reporting, it's probably one of my most favorite things about BPC is the member recognition. That's what it's called anyway. They call it member recognition. And this, if you flag it on, just gives you the capability to start building a report from scratch. Now, I could certainly go up and select new report, and then this is the same screen that we saw when we did edit report. I can do the drag and drop, and I can drag my rows, my columns, and start a number of different options. The report editor is certainly for building some nice, robust reports. But to be able to also have it recognize, I can come in here and say, all product lines, because that's what I see up here. It's going to type the description, not even the ID. The ID is here, just the description. It's going to recognize that for me. All right, it flashes green. I can then also, I'm going to pull in the full year. All right, so all I had to do was type in one row and one column, and it starts to build my report for me. I purposely chose, total product lines, and then the full year, so that we could start to build this out a little bit more. I'm quickly going to use, if I draw your eyes over to the right, is the EPM pane. Notice that once I key that information in, it also now recognizes it's over here. So I can come in and make a quick change to say, you know what, I just want to see description on here. And then I want to do the same with time. So I'll just double click and say display just the description. Say okay for this one, just so we get a little bit more room. Okay, so now I have the ability where, I could have said within my time dimension exactly what I wanted, but I wanted to pick a total because I can now double click and start to drill into my report. Oh, I see we're running out of time here. Same thing here with the columns. I can do that. I can nest reports. So you can kind of see how easy it is. I could come back here and say, I want to do this also by entity, right? So now I can add that to the outside. Now I'm looking at a total company. I can double click on that, and now I'm starting to see that by my different groups as well. So anyway, just a quick overview of some of the powerful functionality of the reporting with BPC. So I know that we are out of time. So let me get back to my PowerPoint. Sometimes I lose track of time when I start moving and reporting with BPC. So I thank all of you for joining. I leave the last slide here is my information, Beth McBreen, also Lauren information. Should you have any questions, any specific questions around converting or transitioning from BCS to BPC, or just have any BPC questions in general, I'm always happy to help. So feel free to reach out. Thank you all for joining. Have a nice day.